looking at organisational agility, we've been able to pinpoint and narrow down 8 building blocks that really differentiate between organisations that are truly agile and their peers. And if you think very broadly about these 8 building blocks, they can be looked at under 3 clusters. One is about how the organisation thinks. The second is the internal environment that organisation creates. And the third is the decisions made and the actions taken. So starting first with how the organisation thinks. When we look at really agile organisations, there are 2 ways in which they differentiate themselves. One is that they have better approaches to gathering, synthesising and making sense of a lot of external information and data. There's usually never a shortage of information in any organisation about what's going on in the market. The challenge is how you synthesise it. And organisations that are more agile are the ones that are better able to read the signs and make decisions on the basis of this. The second way in which they differentiate themselves in how they think is that there is a real focus on the enterprise-wide thinking. Whereas in many of their peer organisations we see a lot of siloed thinking that's focused on products or on specific market segments or on regions, in more agile organisations you see people thinking and taking decisions across the board on a very enterprise-wide perspective rather than in a narrow area. Moving to the second area, we think about the internal environments and how they differ. So when we go into a very agile organisation, we see a number of things. First of all, we really notice that leaders are able to grapple with the tightrope of creating clarity for people while accepting a level of ambiguity. Every organisation is facing a huge amount of ambiguity, but some leaders within that try to create so much clarity that they ignore the ambiguity or are completely overwhelmed by the ambiguity and fail to create clarity. The most agile leaders are able to walk that tightrope. Secondly, there's a very strong focus on performance. And by performance, what we see is a focus on outcomes, not on more traditional input measures, which often hold an organisation back. Thirdly, we see a real recognition and reward of flexibility and innovation. And finally, internally, there is often in more agile organisations a culture that really facilitates agility. So where more traditional hierarchical command and control styles of leadership is not evident, but rather a much more flexible environment that is open to new approaches to change and to innovation as well. The final area we see as being a key differentiator for the most agile organisations is in how they make decisions and that they take actions. One thing we see is that there's a huge focus on simplicity. Many organisations are overwhelmed by complexity, but what we see in agile organisations is they strip away a lot of that complexity, focusing on the few things that make the biggest difference. And finally, the decision-making processes. It is incredibly important that organisations bring together all the various component parts that need to be considered in making decisions, but they don't let these bog them down. What they do is that they have processes of bringing it together. They're able to synthesise, make a decision, stay with that decision and act on it. And this again makes a huge difference to organisations that are more agile. So they are the 8 building blocks. What we always recommend is rather than try to work on all 8, that you narrow it down. So one suggestion is to think about areas where your organisation's already strong and build on those, and only identify one area where you really feel that improvement would make a significant return on investment. We look forward to talking more about agility and working with your organisation as you go through the journey of increasing your agility.